Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear students, staff, faculty, those who are watching via Zoom, tonight I have the honor to introduce our guest speaker. In one of our fall 24 lectures, Anna Heringer. My name is Markus Tubissing. I am in this semester the Michael C. Duda Visiting Professor at the School of Architecture of Notre Dame. And usually I teach and research at the University of Applied Science in Potsdam, Germany. Maybe I was asked to introduce Anna Heringer today because we have several things in common. Obviously, we're both from Germany, but I also want to point out that we are both from the south of Germany. We're both from Bavaria. I have a keen interest in Asia, so does our guest speaker today. And we also had a common time at METI Zurich, just to name a few of the things we have in common. Anna Heringer will speak to us tonight about architecture as a tool to improve lives and correlate our architectural discipline with the idea of sustainability. This is a theme that the School of Architecture at Notre Dame is momentarily tackling very actively, especially through the introduction of our Master in Historic Preservation at our school. So we are very thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Anna Heringer was born and raised in South Bavaria and studied in Linz, Austria. Already early in her academics, she established a key interest in sustainable development work in South Asia, especially Bangladesh. Her university thesis with the title School, Handmade in Bangladesh, was subsequently realized through fundraising and with the assistance of the local community in Radrapur in northern Bangladesh. We're speaking of an area far in the north, about 150 miles northeast of New Delhi. After this primary project, numerous of her building designs throughout the world followed, also in involving local craftsmen and communities, as the Dipshika Improvement School in Bangladesh and also the Training Center for Sustainability in Marrakesh, Morocco. Her work has been widely shown in museums and galleries around the world. She has received numerous renowned awards, such as the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, the Regional Holcim Award, and the Global Award for Sustainable Architecture. And she has lectures internationally and taught at renowned universities, such as the ETH Zurich, where I was able to closely follow her work in 2014 when she taught Design Studio together with Martin Rauch. In the context of climate change, addressing the potentials and the key role of architecture in this global challenge cannot be overemphasized, and it should unite our profession around the globe. Anna Heringer herself says, "For me, sustainability is a synonym for beauty. A building that is harmonious in its design, structure, technique, and use of materials, as well as with the location, the environment, the user, the socio-cultural context. This, for me, is what defines its sustainable and aesthetic values." I think closer we possibly cannot get to the principles that our father of architecture, Vitruvius, declared in his 10 books on architecture, principles, to which we, our profession, should, especially today, be committed, and which can be regarded as one of the earliest and most fundamental theories of sustainable architecture. We are very thrilled to hear your lecture. Please welcome Anna Heringer.
Thank you for this wonderful introduction. So, thank you also for the possibility to do it online, because I'm trying to avoid flying if possible. Of course, for for some projects I need to fly, like for Ghana, where I'm soon. But I'm happy if I don't have to hop on a plane for a lecture. And luckily, we have our digital tools these days. Yeah, to me, architecture is a tool to improve lives. And I'm very much aware that also the opposite is true, that through our profession, we contribute to climate change in a massive way. We also foster social injustice because we often are in the service of those who are rich and in power. But I'm a stubborn idealist. I believe we can do better with our profession, and we can build up buildings, and at the same time, we can build up communities, and we can do this in harmony with nature. Yeah, this photo shows a study trip with the students of ETH Zurich. It was the end of October and it was really cold. It was still the frost on the ground at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And at one point, we surprised the group with the fact that there was no accommodation, no hut, no nothing booked for the night. And that it was the challenge to build your own shelter with whatever you could find as future architects. And of course, the reactions were quite mixed in Switzerland. Of course, you find the outdoor freaks who think, we're gonna build the hut as we did when we were young, gonna sleep in it, great. And then, but this was the more smaller portion. But then there were like the middle portion was thinking, there must be a plan B, but there was no plan B. And then the third one were just utterly shocked, but everyone did it. Results were not really luxurious sleeping units, but it was really nice to see all the students the next morning. They were bursting full of confidence and saying, "Hey, this, we survived it, we did it," and it was a great learning experience also for us teachers. That there are so many resources given by nature for free. And all that you need is basically the sensitivity to see those resources and the creativity to use them. And I found myself in a similar situation. I was a development learner in Bangladesh when I was 19 years old. I lived in a Bangladeshi village and learned from a local NGO, Deepshika. And what I learned there is that the most effective strategy for all good development is always to look at the resources you have in your direct surrounding, within yourself, in your direct surrounding, in your network, underneath your feet, and trying to make the best out of these resources without getting depending on external factors. And this is what I tried to do to translate into architecture. Then 7 years later, I designed a school for that particular village, for Rudrapur. And in terms of materials, I didn't have to look far. They were right under my feet: the mud, the dirt, the bamboo that was growing all around. And in terms of energy sources, I focused on people. And when we think of energy sources these days, we think of oil, we think of solar, we think of gas, we think of wind. But we mostly forget that each and every one of us is a source of energy too. Plus, we are a growing source with 8 billion people, and a creative one, and a source that also wants to be needed and used, because otherwise we also create a social problem. So creating work is always an essential part of all the projects that I'm doing. So we had a completely unplugged site. We had, as mixing machines, we had cows and water buffaloes. We only had 4 drilling machines that we would charge in the night. And other than that, it was completely unplugged and really only muscle energy. And it was a completely different soundscape also on site. It was really beautiful. It was much more much less aggressive somehow when I compare it to the sites that we have here in Europe now. Yeah, after 6 months of construction, the school looked like this. And the school was my diploma project in Linz, and I got realized together with Eike Roswak. And I want to say that, it's the best moment when you graduate. I know we have a bit of an advantage in Europe because we don't have to pay back student loans, but it was the best time, to go out in the field directly from university with all the ideals that I had in my mind, testing them in the field, testing them in reality, finding my own Haltung. And that was something that I would really recommend. In it's normally we step in the footsteps of the previous generations, but it's also the generation that really caused the climate change. So finding new ways, new solutions is really crucial. Yeah, we kept the tradition to sit on the ground in the traditional rural areas, and through this hole in the back wall, come to the cave area. And I'm always asked, did the kids participate in the design? And no, they did not, because it's not easy to design a school, and that's why we also get trained to be architects for many years. But I think what's very important is to make the participation in some physical way, in some other way, which I talk about later. But what I did very carefully is observing kids. And I also kind of did the research in my own childhood, in my channeled in a way my own inner child. What are the spaces that I liked when I was a kid? And the briefing of the client was very clear. He wanted to have a school where the kids go in every day and are excited to get in, and feel comfortable, and get relaxed, to open up the senses, and are open for new things. So the so I was trying to find, to remember, what were the spaces that I felt really protected, that I felt really kind of comfortable and safe to, and because these are then the moments where you are able to open up for new things. And I think these are pretty archaic spaces. It's like the mother womb, or the cave, or also could be a crown of a tree, where you're protected from all the leaves. But very important is that you have the full overview of the things that are going on, or you're sitting underneath a table with the table close, protecting you from the views of others, but acoustically you hear everything. So you have the same situation that the caves, you're protected, but you always have the overview and the connection to the group. You're never excluded, and that was important. So the school respects different pace of learning, and there are always people that are faster doing their tasks, finishing them faster. And it was important somehow to give those kids a chance, to just grab a book, retreat in the caves, and start working on their own, and not giving pressure to the other kids, and pressure to finish soon. And so it's very much working in that way. They're also used for meditation, and of course for playing, and breakup rooms, when you want to split teams. It really works in various ways. On the top floor, it's more the opposite. It's the overview, it's the tree house. It brings the lightness in, also the colors, and that's kind of the opposite, the overview, that is also important. And the kids all signed with the names on the doors. You could imagine it's like a blackboard in the end of the day, scribbled with all the names, and then during the day it just opens. And they rightfully signed in Bengali with their names, because they also helped building the school. And this is the part where the participation for me comes in. And through all the projects that I did, this is by far the most effective and most joyful participation that can be. And this is why I love mud, or one of the reasons why I love mud, because it's such an inclusive material. You cannot work with sophisticated tools that could harm you, or you cannot work with toxic materials. And but I guess you all remember how it feels like having your hands in soil, having it in clay, having it in mud. It's a beautiful feeling. So it's actually something very joyful. And of course, during the mornings they had normal classes, and then in the afternoons they would come and usually they would have creative classes, like clay pottery works and so on. So they had pottery work in a slightly bigger scale of a building. And I guess you can imagine how it feels when you're a small boy or a small girl standing in front of your school and knowing that, I built this thing, with just my muscles and the dirt underneath my feet. That gives such an enormous boost of confidence in your own potentials, in the team around you, and of course also in the local materials that usually have a very poor and bad image, especially mud. it's often branded as the material that is absolutely not durable and so on, but it can be very durable. I mean, in all cultures, in all climate zones, we have buildings built out of pure clay that are there since hundreds of years. There are certain rules, which is a good foundation, a good cover from the top, and then a good mix, a good material mix, good craftsmanship, and then those buildings can stand for a long time. And to me, earth is really the champion when it comes to sustainable building materials. It's the only material you can take from the ground, use it as load-bearing walls, as plasterings, as floors, as ceilings in combination with wood, for example. It's the only material that you can use and reuse without any loss of quality. So usually when we talk about recycling, we talk about downcycling, but with clay, it's just adding water and then you mix it again and you get the same quality, absolutely same quality. And if you need to repair something, if a corner gets broken, you just take the broken part, make it wet, make the part wet where it's from, and then put it back and it looks just as before. So that for me is absolutely fascinating. And if you don't need the building anymore, you return it back to the ground it came from and you plant a garden on top. And that's for me really the circularity that is amazing. When it comes to economic sustainability, it was beautiful to observe, how the workers invested their share of the building budget. So every day in the evening, they come and they get the money, their salary, and often we would go to the local market together, and I could see how they spent their share of the building budget. And they bought the vegetables from the neighbors, or got the bicycle repaired, or a new blouse or sari from the tailors. So the money was reinvested in a community, and the result of the budget was not just the school building, but it was at the same time a catalyst for local development. And that is what really made me mostly happy, because if I had built that school in steel or concrete, that money would have been exported and lost for the community. So for me, when it comes to the economics, the main question is always who gets the profit, this cui bono question. And usually it's always low cost, low cost, low cost, but that's not the point. I think it's really the question who gets the profit. And when I'm at the end of my career as an architect, kind of make a sum up of all the building budgets that went through my hands, and as architects, we are in charge of large budgets. Really, I mean, millions of dollars. So we have power in our hands, and the choice of a building material ultimately also defines who's getting the profit. And this is something that we sometimes forget. And I think it's very crucial. We have a lot of social impact through the choice of material and technology. I built several buildings in that village in Rotopur, and that's the last one. And the first ones that I built are very rectangular, like straight walls, straight corners. It was also important to show and to prove that you can build precise architecture even with the most modest materials, the local materials, the local natural materials. But with that building that is a center for people with disabilities, I wanted to show that it's something beautiful, that we are not all sort of follow the normal pattern, but that there are people that break out of the mold. And so that building really also breaks out of the mold and dances in curves, and it really wants to celebrate this diversity that we have. So when you approach the building, the first thing you see is the ramp that kind of winds up all around the building. And it was already during the construction that people came and asked, hey, why do you need a ramp? And it's the only ramp in that area. And because it's so dominant also, um, it brought the inclusivity so much at the forefront. And that is something I love about architecture, that it can make visible visions and things and concepts that are usually difficult to explain, and whatever, with architecture, with one glimpse you can get it. And it's also a very powerful part of our profession. These are the therapy rooms in the ground floor, And underneath the ramp, there are also caves, but they're differently shaped than the ones of the METI school. You can actually glide in from the ground, and then you have to move your body much more. The muscles are much more triggered. It's much more difficult to move through these caves than through the other one, and it's kind of a trigger of muscle coordination. So the building itself becomes a tool of therapy also. And normally when there are tools of physical therapy, you climb up, you climb down, you climb up, you climb down, and it's sort of a boring thing. But with that one, you discover also a little universe. So this is how the ramp in bamboo and clay. And by the way, there is no stabilization in the clay. It's 100% clay, just water added and some straw, but that's all. And then on the top floor, there's the workshop for dipty textiles. And usually, as an architect, we're used to be responsible for the building, for sort of the vessel. But in that case, I'm also responsible of the program that happens in this building. So what I saw during the many years that I came back to Bangladesh, it's since 1997. I've been there almost every year, and you wonder about the brain drain, and of course also the rural to urban kind of migration. And what I see is that the settlement factors are mostly influenced by the garment sector. And we always think, it's the planners and the designers, the architects who shape spaces, but actually we all shape spaces through the way we shop, through the way we consume. And this is something that I also would like to put awareness on it, that we create everything that we buy, especially our clothes. There is a spatial expression in it. And the way our clothes are produced usually come along with not very humane conditions. And I saw that so many women had to leave the villages where they had quite an independence, and quite a still quite a good life quality, and ending up in these factory spaces that are not really a fair way to live. Why do they end up there? It's because the land resources are not enough anymore to feed the family, so they need a second economic leg, and they don't usually find it in the villages. So that's why NGOs and a lot of development organizations are training women, under the kind of umbrella of women empowerment, and they're training like 30 women every 2 months, every 3 months. And you wonder how many tailors can a village take. But finally they end up in the factories to produce our cheap clothing. And that's something that I'm not really happy about. And we tried, as an architect, I find I'm at my limits with my tools. So together with friends and tailors and textiles designer, we started the initiative of Dipty Textiles, where we produce textile art and also textile fashion. Of course, the working conditions are completely different than the ones in the factories. And these are just some of the products that we're doing. We also do exhibitions a lot to raise awareness on this topic. This was part of the Biennale in 2018 under the motto Free Space. We also document our own architecture projects on those sari blankets. And this one I particularly like a lot. It's the portrait of the village of Rudrapur. And the blue dots that you see are the ponds, of course, for fish cultivation and for bathing and for cleaning and whatever. But they're at the same time the excavation sources for the clay to be used for building the houses. And the dark green spots are the bamboo that are kind of growing on Almende area. So you have the building materials in your direct surrounding growing or underneath your feet. And then of course all the landscape that is for, of course, a lot also for food cultivation. So fooding, housing, and in that village also clothing is, and I think these are three very important sectors to lead a sustainable life. They are very closed and small circles. No matter if it's architecture or textiles, the principle and the approach is always the same. It's local materials, local energy sources, especially craftsmanship, plus the global knowledge. this is something I think knowledge, information should be kind of everywhere accessible. And that's the fantastic thing that we have with our technologies like this Zoom now, that we can have access to information and knowledge. And then, of course, it's important to kind of break it down and see, okay, how can I apply it to the local conditions, and how can I create with that knowledge and the local materials a unique solution that is really tailored for the specific place. We're switching to China now. I was invited to take part at the Bamboo Biennale together with Kenko Kuma, Simon Welles, to name just a few, and Vandrangia. And the briefing of the clients was to show that we show that bamboo can be a modern material, can be a contemporary material, and I happily participated. I was in charge of these 3 hostels, and youth hostels. And the core that I designed was built out of clay and stones. It's fireproof. You have the utility rooms in it, and attached to this core, there are kind of the sleeping concourse for the boys and girls, and then outside a very expressive shape of bamboo. And normally, we always think, when we think of sustainability, we think of limited resources. But when you build with materials that are there in abundance, and bamboo and clay are there in abundance, then of course you can have also very expressive shape. And the nature of nature is not limitation. The nature of nature is abundance. So these are the cores out of rammed earth and stone. And you might think, yeah, maybe that works in a small rural area, but the reality is like this, and that's true. But these people have lived in vernacular structures before. And of course, this trend to exchange natural building materials with concrete is happening all around the globe. In China, it was in a very short time, in a massive scale. It was like in a handful of years between 2011 and 13. China consumed more cement than the United States in the past century. So, but it's not just China. I mean, this is happening all over the world. And this is clearly a trend we cannot just continue this way, because we don't have the resources for that. And it's not just the energy that we need to produce the concrete, the steel. It's also the energy that we need to make it a comfortable indoor climate. So we need air conditioning, of course, in these kind of buildings, much more than we need it, for example, in clay buildings or in earth buildings. So if you think it's just possible in small rural areas, then look at this one. This is Shibam in Yemen. This was built. It's 500 years old. This town, and I would say if this was possible 500 years ago, we should be able to do this nowadays as well. With all the technologies we have, with all the know-how that we have, and all the informations, we should be able to build it as well again today. And how would you do that? Of course, you cannot rotate with water buffaloes in Germany or in the States. You need other tools and methods. And this, for example, is a factory for rammed earth, prefabricated rammed earth elements in Schlins, where I'm at the moment. It's the workplace of Martin Rauch, and he developed it like this big machinery. It's like a rammed earth plotter that plots like 40 meters of rammed earth wall. Then this wall is cut into pieces, air dried, just naturally air dried without any additional energy. And then it's going to be stapled on the site to load bearing buildings. And where does the material come from? It's just a normal excavation material from various sites. And there is so much excavation material in Austria. It's about 65% of all the waste, like the construction waste, is excavation material. And some people, Cycloterre, they did the research, how much mass is it alone in the Ile-de-France around Paris. So it is really lots of millions of tons of material. And I remember when we did the structure in front of the GSD at Harvard, we also took excavation material from Boston. So there is a lot of material around. Right now, we pay for dumping this material. If we just imagine that we all look for like the green concrete, this new super material, that can do all the tricks and it's carbon neutral, can be made in high-tech modes of construction, low-tech modes of construction. You can even mix it. It's available everywhere on this planet, given for free, and we dump it. Now it's just incredible that we do so. And I think there are better ways to use that material. Yeah, we're coming to the campus St. Michael in Traunstein in Germany, where I'm building right now one of the largest structures so far. It's the central building is out of rammed earth, where I'm using the prefabricated rammed earth techniques, and the little one on the side is made out of wood, out of timber structure. And here you see the blocks. They're just literally stapled on top of each other just by a line of clay mortar. There is no iron in it, and then it's a very archaic, massive structure then in the end. And these kind of blocks are getting retouched by just using, making the joints wet with water, putting the same material in, closing it, and then you can retouch it. You don't see the blocks anymore. It's a completely monolithic building without any joints. We also did a lot of participation in that one. So I'm always trying, because this is what I learned from building in the Global South, that you bond people when you do those kind of participatory kind of accents. And of course, you cannot build like these load bearing structures with it, but you always find some sort of niches and possibilities to include the future users. And hopefully in a year, no, less than a year, in half a year, the building looks like this. We are already pretty far in construction. And this is another project in Germany. It's the Rosana Guest House. It's an extension of an Ayurveda clinic that I designed together with Martin Rauch. It also won the European Bauhaus Award. And it's in a very sensitive area, in an alluvial forest. And we basically took the materials from the alluvial forest, which is willow, which is timber, and inside also a lot of clay and earth. And since it's very sensitive, we didn't want to make it very architectural, like we wanted to make it much more organic, more like a nest. And inside it's a very calm atmosphere, and it definitely supports the healing process, because what's happening, usually we enter a room and we feel kind of disconnected to nature. But the feedback that we get from people there is when they enter the rooms, they still feel very much connected to nature, and they feel embraced by nature. And it's also a lot of people go there who are close to burnout, who are, like really exhausted or sick. And in those kind of situations, to be surrounded with materials that are very shiny, that are monochromatic, that are perfect, is even more difficult. You feel even more as an alien. And being surrounded with materials like clay that have their cracks, they have their wrinkles, they have some sort of inhomogenic surface. It makes you feeling much more part of nature. And if you want to build really in harmony with nature, really sustainable, then we sort of also have to accept that death and decay are a part of nature too. And this is probably the part that is the most difficult to accept, because we try so much to avoid the topic of death, of decay. We try to be as perfect as possible. We try to neglect aging and all sorts of things, and we try to be so perfect. And this kind of quest for perfection is also something that is causing all this exhaustion, this mental exhaustion that we have. And I think we should let go of this pressure of perfection, and also accept imperfection as well as decay, which is of course a hard part, but I think it's part of part of life, part of the game. Yeah, I think these are the building materials of the future: earth, wood or bamboo, and fibers for insulation, natural fibers. We stay a bit in the Alpine region in Vorarlberg in Austria. We were commissioned, or together with Anka Dürr, with Martin Rauch and Sabrina Sommer, I was commissioned to design a prototype for space for giving birth. And I was like, wow, I never thought, that there are still some white spots on the landscape of architectural typologies. I mean, we have spaces for almost everything, for almost every purpose. But we somehow forgot the most important and most creative act a human being can do or is able to do. And it's probably also, because both medicine and architecture was probably a very male, not probably, it was a very male dominated field. So it is, this topic of giving birth is sort of solved on a functional level. You can go to the hospital, but that is not really, giving reference to, or is not really giving the importance to that moment of giving birth. And if we imagine, babies coming out of the warmth, where it's dark, where it's all very, you know it's very cozy, it's very essential also in a way, and it comes out in this bright light in the hospital, that of course is a shock. And then, all this sort of cold materials, and then you have the woman, the mother, um who needs to open up. It's all about opening up if you give birth, and then you're surrounded with materials that are extremely hygienic, but not at all, that you want to touch it. It's the opposite. You don't want to open up. It's kind of, you want to retreat inside. So it's not very supportive to the birthing process. So we came up with the idea to build a cave, an earth cave, a earth womb, and we couldn't find sponsors. Interestingly, we asked a lot of companies, we couldn't find any, but there were 400 women in that area, in that rural area, that said, "Hey, we want that topic to happen. We want that prototype to happen." And they sponsored, and they did not sponsor the money and the material, but they also sponsored the time and their skills. So we had a lot of participation on the site as well. You see, it's prefabricated in clay bricks with fibers. So, and then of course this shape would resolve in the rainy climate in Austria. So the structure was covered with lots and lots of wooden shingles, which is tradition in that area. We used it in a bit of a twisted way with different colors and formats, and it's a very organic structure in a way. This is the floor plan. This is the test of the site. It's of course very small because we didn't have much budget. But one of our architects is also midwife, Anka Dürr. So she tested different birthing positions, and this is how it looks like from the inside. So it's almost a kind of a sacralic place, and it's of course also gives space to the miracle that's happening when new life is created. This is how it sits in the landscape. It has a garden with herbal plants around it, that are specifically supportive for the female body. And then, of course, it's used mostly. The building is used for discussions, for workshops, and so on. So they do this inside, but also outside around the building. And this is how it sits in the landscape. Of course, ideally, it would be located next to or attached to a hospital. Yeah, just going back, when we were designing there and we were so many women on the site, I must say I was longing to for the integration of more female aspects also in architecture. It's not just about women in architecture, it's about integrating female aspects. It's not about the efficiency and the higher and the better and the most modern material and exploiting new resources and so on. It's very much also about the process and how the process is designed. It's about the care, and how not just to how it's also matters how an aim and a building is erected, not just that it is erected. And the process is really important, and the care factor and the intuition. And this is something that I'm lacking very much in architecture, also especially in education. We are so trained in analyzing, in being articulate and whatever, but we are not so trained to listen to our intuition. And I think this, if a design is born in the head or born out of empathy and out of intuition, I think you can feel it. We're going to Ghana now, where I'm also in charge for a campus for the solutions of Don Bosco. And this is, for example, one of this thinking that is based on efficiency and on control and not on intuition. And this master plan was given to me that was kind of a master plan that is implemented so many times in not just in Ghana, it's in many countries it's implemented like this. The basis, of course, is not the cultural context, but it's the Roman military camp. It's all about the overview, the control, and the discipline. And on the right side is the traditional setting, the traditional context. The earth architecture is very much alive there. You have all sorts of building there, rectangular, round, different shapes and sizes and proportions. And yet, so often when institutions are coming and it's the Catholic Church, it could be the same other religions, it could be governments, it could be NGOs, aid organizations. Usually they come with a very functional scheme and also ignoring the local building materials. So what I did, I took the master plan, cut it out in clay, and then did a very intuitive clay storming. That's how I call it, and tried to bring in these elements and these qualities and atmospheres of the traditional homesteads in it. So this is sort of the plan of the campus with lots of agriculture also involved. And this is how the site works. So it's completely low tech again. It's the Atak Palmer technique. It's a local technique that they use in Ghana, in the northern part of Ghana. And it's how the building goes up, completely low tech, no electricity there. And as you can see in the beginning, I was very strict because I had designed the windows in a normal rectangular shape. But then what happened is that the women came on site and they started plastering the building, and they plastered it like this, round. You don't plaster with your hand, you don't plaster like this, you plaster like this. And then suddenly the windows become a completely different shape. And that's the co-creation. That's the most beautiful part in the project when that happens. Then these things are coming in these aspects of the local genius loci and the knowledge of the people and just the knowledge of the hand that comes in, and that I find very beautiful and very authentic also. And when I showed this picture to the bosses in Accra, they were like, "Pooh, Anna, what can we do that the building doesn't look so shabby?" And I was thinking, "Oh my God, is it really bad?" I was really uncertain suddenly. It's like then this building or this picture exactly 10 days later, it was hanging in an exhibition that I had in Madrid, and Norman Foster came to the opening, and he stopped exactly at this picture and he said, this facade is a piece of art. And this is kind of the two mindsets that are coming together. We, of course, we love this authenticity. We can see the power that is in there, and for someone who has had a lot of training to get away from these handmade things into industrial ones, it's very difficult to adjust with the idea of this manual aspects and the craftsmanship. So we are in the process. We are in the process of making compromises, making angles more straight, but then again not losing the tactile aspects and the poesy that is poetic that's in those structures. So it's a process, and in the end, my compass needle is always kind of orientated towards my gut feeling. And you never know, there's always a reason for A or for B, but in the end it has to feel right. Yeah, the process is just as important as the outcome. It's part of our Laufen Manifesto that I did together with colleagues from all over the world. And I show the last project that again I designed together with Martin Rauch. It's an altar for this cathedral for St. Peter in Worms. It's a 1,000-year-old cathedral. And after the second Council of the Vatican. The original altar that was built from Balthasar Neumann, one of the most important Baroque architect that we had in Germany. And of course, it was very difficult to put something permanent in front of that Balthasar Neumann altar. And one priest after the other just transferred this task to the next generation, and they had just a very a very basic wooden table in front of it. But for the 1,000-year-old or for the 1,000th anniversary birthday, the community decided now it's time for a real altar. So they made a competition, and in the final round, there were like really beautiful objects, but made out of steel and prefabricated. The idea was to bring it in the church, install it there, and that's it. And Martin and me, we came in and we said, "Hmm, we don't come with the final product. We come with tools, and we take the local soil, and we would recommend ramming it with the community." And that's what we did. And what was really fascinating was that it worked just the same way as it works in Ghana, or as it works in Bangladesh. It is like this is so much bonding, in the beginning, for example, it was the idea to bring in historic aspects of the town. So we had from the Roman Empire, there was a stone coming in, and then some other cathedrals were sending items. So it was all very official. It was documented. It was in the radio, and then people started to bring their own personal items. So they would bring the necklace from the grandmother, the amulet, then an important letter that was really dear to them, or newspaper articles of events of the community that they were proud of, or the best honey, the best wine of the area. It was really beautiful to see how much this altar became, their object. And one of, for me, the most emotional moments was I had some Indian soil at home, and I brought it and gave it to Indian nuns that were there since a long time in Worms in Germany. And then the moment they put in their soul from the Indian soil, they're like really the tears were running down their cheeks, and you could feel so much. Earth is much more than just a building material. It's home. It's an element. It's something so archaic, and we have such a deep connection to it. And if we just consider how many songs and rhymes and reeds we have, and we even call it Mother Earth, so it's a very important element. Kids came, they mixed the clay with their fingers. They enjoyed it so much to have their hands in the dirt, and then they wanted to have pink glitter in the altar. The priest was not so amused. He was concerned that the altar would glitter in pink, which wasn't the case in the end. But the kids had a blast, so they were ramming with their feet, singing. It was really wonderful. And then the moment comes when, the chicken comes out of the eggshell, the shuttering comes off, and you can see we couldn't let go of the baby. That was just our thing. We had to pamper it all the time. We had to touch it all the time. It was really, there's so much energy in this thing. And this is what we sometimes forget. When we talk about participation, we think of we can vote for option A, or we can vote for option B, but there is no energy input of us in it. And the happiness factor and the satisfaction factor is linked to how much energy and how much effort you put into something. And you cannot build something alone. When you build something, you always need other people around you, and you have a communal awareness. It's just a very natural thing, and it is something that really bonds people together. And when we think of the past as a society, we had the traditions to build our own structures. We built churches, we built temples, we built city halls, schools, and most of all, we helped building each other's homes. So we were part of the neighborhood, physically part of the neighborhood, and that was really uniting. And this picture is very symbolic to me, with all the gold and the marble and the precious materials in the background. In our parts of the world, if we're honest, we're not lacking material things, but what we lack mostly is good relationships. And also, that we have a purpose, and that we share this purpose, and that we share an aim together. And this is something that a well-designed architectural process can also deliver and offer. And that for me is something very important. That is something that I learned from the Global South that I think we need to integrate in our parts of the world as well. We all learned form follows function, but with these pressing challenges that we have with the climate change, with the growing social injustice, we cannot solve this on a purely functional level. And to me, sustainability is not a question of technologies, resources, or money. It's much more than that. If I compare, building here in the global north, especially to other parts in the world, what is very obvious here is that we base our decisions so often on fear, either on fear or on greed. And this is the worst thing to design, yeah, or as a basis of decisions. And there's only one thing that is stronger than fear, and that is love. And if we take our decisions in design, in life, out of love towards others and towards nature, then I believe sustainability happens in a completely natural way. And that's why form follows love. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Heringer, for this wonderful lecture and for reminding us that sustainability is not only about what we do, but also how we do it and how we live. So the changes that we are addressing go far beyond the system of architecture. It's also the way we interact with each other. Perhaps before I ask the audience to bring forth their question. There's a very personal question I would like to put forth, which you perhaps could answer the best. Having spent much time in Bangladesh and India, we often hear two versions of the society there. On one side, we say that Bangladesh and India is in a way already a repair and use culture. There's many aspects of reusing materials that are to be found. So that is something within the culture. And on the other hand, I've seen so much pollution and garbage and environmental damage, especially in the south of India. Where would you locate the situation that you have worked in more, and how can we picture what you have seen?
Yeah, of course, that's true. In rural areas, it's much more the recycling and reusing and repairing. When I came there first in 1997, I was so amazed of the ability to create the everyday things on your own and repair them. That was real resilience. That is, a level of development that we are far from that one. And of course, in the cities there is a lot of waste. And of course, when you have before you didn't had the plastic materials, there was just no access for that. There was no access, and now you have it all around, and people are just throwing it as if it was organic waste, and it's a huge issue, and to avoid plastic is a huge battle. It's really a huge battle, and to raise the awareness for that is really critical.
Yes, and as you say, the synthetic materials, the plastic is also an everyday part of our building culture. We install a lot of these materials into by building the way
Yes.
we build. So today we're going to change the modus a little bit so that Anna Heringer can see you as asking the questions. Please come forth to the podium so that you're being filmed by the camera if you have the first questions. Please.
Maybe you can line up.
Yes, it would perhaps, if you'd like to come forth.
Sorry for this formal way.
This is also very participating, so we're part of the project already.
Thank you so much. My name is Davis Kikundi, a graduate student here at the University of Notre Dame. My question is about the perception of vernacular architecture, not just to the users, but due to modernism, and you see the effects of modernism and people wanting to live in a very aesthetically pleasing, and also it's kind of wave that everyone wants to be in a modern kind of a space. So what's the perception of these people and about the building, and maybe the life cycle of the building, because you might get that after a few years they might want to replace this same building that is built in a vernacular way. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So in Bangladesh, they have, for example, two expressions for buildings, for architecture. One is bari, is like the locally made mud house, and then the real architecture is called building, the English term. So I always ask them, so what are our structures? Are they body like the mud houses, or are they buildings? And it's very clear they call them buildings. So it is, the architecture can, and the design can sort of uplift the perception, and that's kind of the tool that we have, that we do. I mean, that everyone wants to be proud of a building they live in. Of course, it's a prestigious thing. So we, as designers, we have to react on that longing, and on that kind of need for prestige. And so the design is one part, and the participation is the other part, because when you're physically part of the building, you own it. You are part of it. And especially in Ghana, I see, I learned something new. It's like, they call it charged. They have empty objects, they have no soul. And then they have, and the clay walls, they see it as the keeper of their emotions, also of and the engineer, Lord Gigato, with whom I'm collaborating there on this project, he told me, when a person dies, usually then the body is brought out, and then the spiritual person comes in, and he asks the clay walls, the mud walls, if the death was a good one, or if there's something still to resolve. And the mud walls are telling that, and it's the connection to Mother Earth, it's the connection to the mother warmth, the kind of the archaic mother warmth. So it is something that people in the rural areas can very much relate to it, and the workers like it a lot. The villagers, the workers, those who are considered the middle class, and those who have been brought up in concrete houses and concrete schools, for example, and institutes, they have difficulties. It's like, I have the feeling. I mean, I remember when I grew up in a very beautiful, old, like historic surrounding, and then I moved to my studies to Linz, and I moved into a concrete building, and I felt like I have to shut down some senses to I really felt like, okay, I have to desensitize myself when I'm going in, because I felt really, in the beginning, I felt really hurt. I'm probably a bit oversensitive, but I think everyone feels things like this. So I have the feeling people are kind of already, shut a bit, and then they have really difficulties they were always told, this is how good architecture, modern architecture, is supposed to look like, and suddenly it doesn't work like this anymore, and it turns things upside down, and there's kind of change is always difficult to navigate with. And but I think it can be tackled with the two things that we have as tools, which is the beauty, which is a very strong motivator, and the other thing is the participation. And I mean, we are in the process in Bangladesh. It works very well. I mean, they keep the buildings. As a METI school next year is 20 years old, and it really stands there very strong. and they keep it very good in shape, and I love it. So this is things need time to change, and I'm very sorry that the global south, the global north has kind of formulated an ideal of an architecture, with the storyline and the narrative that it's, you have a comfortable, happy, safe, healthy life, while in fact this ideal contributed massively to climate change and to social injustice, and no one's really correcting this narrative, and I think it's about time that we do.
Thank you very much, Anna, for that really moving talk. I found it beautiful, and also just the feeling of love, as this last quote articulates here, is palpable in your work. I have two questions, sort of one follow-up from the previous question, and then something different. My first question has to do with what you called low-tech building. I'm a historian of architecture, and when I talk about earthen architecture in my history courses, I think there are a lot of assumptions that low-tech architecture equals primitive architecture, right? This is just an assumption in the developed world. How would you counter that narrative, right? That's a pervasive assumption that a lot of people have about this material that you so beautifully work with. My second question has to do with, I wondered if you could speak a little bit more about this idea of following one's intuition, right? And your experience coming to that conclusion and trusting one's intuition. At what point in your career did you have that feeling like, oh, this is a positive thing that I'm following, right? And how do we encourage our students perhaps to do the same? So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, about the low tech, I'm often asked, Anna, do you want to send us back to Stone Age or what with your mod and so on? Of course, that's not the case. For me, it's not a question how old a material is. It's the question of our creative ability to use it in a way that it meets the dreams and aspirations and needs of the current society. And it can be built very low tech. It can be still a sophisticated modern architecture that has nothing to do with each other. And for me, yes, mod is in a way a low tech material, but with a high tech performance. Balancing the indoor humidity so perfectly, acoustically well, easy to repair. Then there's so many so many things that Earth can do, much more than a naked concrete wall, and still we see this primitive material. So this is also a narrative that needs to be changed, and I think it can be changed through good modern architecture. That's where you see and good examples, pilot projects, public buildings where you go in. I'm very happy that we have now this large structure in Germany that is a public structure where people can go in, drink their coffee while it's storming outside, where it's snowing outside and raining, and they see, now the building is not resolving, it's standing strong. I think we just need these examples. And the second thing about the intuition, I just also wrote a book about it, Form Follows Love, Building by Intuition. Well, I think that designing is constant decision making. It is, it's constant decision making. We all know that we take the best decisions out of a gut feeling, out of intuition. And I realized several years after, finishing the METI school, after getting these awards and so on, I was still waiting for someone. First, it was a teacher or an architecture critique or a curator, something, or a journalist, someone to tell me, this is good or this is bad, until I understood, hey, Anna, you feel it yourself. You feel it very well yourself when something is good, when it feels right, when closes a circle. We all know that feeling. But we always, we are so trained to focus on the outside voices, And it's basically really training to trust yourself, to trust, and get a bit rid of this constant inner judge that you have, that tearing you down. And it's when I'm teaching, I'm doing the clay storming with students. We do 4 or 5 days, working with our hands on large clay models. And the thing is, you work with two hands, so you activate both sides or both hemispheres of the brain. Then constantly changing. When you build the model with styro cutter and glues and whatever stuff, or with wood or whatever, it's difficult to do. You need time to fix it and so on. And then once you have it, you don't want to change it. When you have the clay, you can so easily change it. You make it large, you see, you get directly the impulse. You feel it, really. You get the impulse, oh, this is too much, this is too high. You cut it, no, it can take a little bit more, maybe I'm trying out a diagonal. You get directly the impulses from the model, and then you're in the detail. At the same time, you're having the full overview of the model. It's completely different than designing on the screen or designing two-dimensional with on paper. It is really something much more holistic, and it's basically the training to listen to yourself, and to listen to this gut feeling. And we call this method that I developed together with Martin Rauch clay storming, because it's also really good in producing a lot of solutions without constantly judging. And then at one point you come into this very meditative atmosphere. When you were a child and you were playing and building something, you're completely in the moment, and you forget about time and everything. You're very much in that mood, and then you're very concentrated also. And this is sort of the situation where you're best in designing.
Hi, Anna. Thank you for the talk. It was lovely. I'm Nick. I'm a visiting graduate student from Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. I'm a graduate student in transportation systems design. My question is specifically related to the economics of what you talked about with the textile workers. How much of that did you go into knowing about that, knowing about their work, knowing about the processes, and wanting initially to help them, versus learning about them and learning their needs and flexing to their needs? And then second question, similarly, within your design, how much in these contexts are you changing your design over time as it's being built? And how much are you working with the people that you're building for in co-designing? Thank you.
Thank you. So with the dipties, with the tailors, for example, I thought, it was during a time when I also had a small kid at home, and I thought, the ideal version is they take the piece of cloth, they take the design, and then, they take the needle and do it at home at the time that feels right for them, that is perfect, where they can integrate the family and everything. So that was the idea. And then without any building. So then the women really enjoyed it so much to come together and to talk during the stitching and the work, and the especially the embroidery work. Because what you see when you live there is that they come together, and then on the road, which is just a small, mud road, they come together and do the stitching of the blankets for it traditionally, and they chat about their lives and their problems and their challenges, and they share their lives. And this is exactly what's happening there, and they wanted to come together. This is something that I misunderstood. I thought it's the most family friendly when they have it completely decentralized without even a factory building. So now it was clear that we need a building for them, and they're also extremely proud to be able to say, to their husband, hey, I'm going to office now. I'm going to work. And it even happens, some of the mothers are breastfeeding, that the men are bringing, the fathers are bringing the baby for breastfeeding and taking them home again. So it's really interesting how quite modern they are, and they organize themselves, because for us it's completely okay also to have the kids there. Some take the kids with them, and some prefer to have really to be on their own, to be able to concentrate on themselves and on their friends circle and so on. And what we saw is that the economics is just one part of it. The other part is really the sharing of the sorrows and joys and to uplift each other. And it's incredible how much they are growing. It's really beautiful. It's enormously beautiful to see that. And the second question about the processes, the co-creation, that is just something that happens. So normally when I'm here in Germany designing, I have to know everything. Like years ago, I have to hand in the papers, and then it's all about controlling that the kind of the design is exactly implemented, how it is planned, and it has to be like this, which is for me an awful way to design. It's for me very difficult. I really don't like it at all because I'm trained in the other way because I started building in a different way in Bangladesh, and there is so much more, to be very much aware in the moment, to see all the potentials that are there, and you're much more like a conductor. You see, okay, this woman has a fantastic skill, and this guy has a great skill too. So you give space to that skills. So it's like, like let them play a solo and let them and the next one get the lead. And but then of course you're the conductor, just to come in, okay, when it comes to the proportion and to get the main thing together. But it's very much like an orchestra where different people are bringing in their voices and their instrument and their skills, and it's much more being aware of the moment, be very intuitive and fast in decision making, also on site then, and letting go of control and perfection, the quest for perfection. That's probably the hardest part.
That's going to be indeed a hard one. I have two questions from our online community. And the first one is from Kioma. And the question is, hi, Anna. Thank you for your lecture. It is very inspiring. When you are working in a new country or context, how do you go about understanding and reflecting the local culture in your architectural design?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in Bangladesh, it was 7 years before I started building. I was really integrated in the community. I spoke the language. I still speak the language. So it is something that I felt really very much part of it. And that was also otherwise I could not have started that building, and I could never have had the trust of the community, and you need the trust of the community to start something like this. Now, when I'm working in a new context, in Ghana, for example, it takes also lots of time to build up the trust. It's not something you cannot rush. It's impossible to rush it. I thought, I can. It's faster and it's gonna be more effective. No, it really needs this trust building period. And but at the same time, it's also the part where you learn. I mean, I personally learn most in this kind of process, and it just takes time. And but still, I think, once you learn the first foreign language, the second one is easier, the third one is easier. You're getting more sensitized, or sensitive throughout the process and the years. And it's basically just listening, and at the same time not just listening outside towards the outside, but also learn to listen, to understand your own basic human needs, archaic human needs. The more you understand yourself better, the more you also understand the others better, no matter what kind of cultural context they have.
And when it comes to local building typologies and local building cultures?
Yeah, there is just really going around, taking notes, doing measurements, taking photographs, and soaking up as much as possible the information, the local building techniques, everything. And then, but when I'm before I'm starting to design, I really go completely blank. And then, the global information kicks in. Sometimes, pictures are coming in that are from a different context, but they can be applied to the local conditions, and they trigger new solutions. And for me, what's the most creative or biggest creative source is that I listen to the climate, I listen to the local materials, and try to make the architecture out of that characteristics. Those are my parameters. And because the climate and the materials are everywhere different, that creates sort of an authenticity in in the language and in the buildings, and that for me is not a limitation. The vulnerability is really something to embrace, and it's a source of inspiration for me.
And here's a final question from our online viewers. Very talented student of mine who is also very interested in your topic, so it doesn't surprise me that she wrote to us, JG. I really admire your work and thank you so much for the wonderful lecture. I was wondering, would it be possible to implement the work that you are doing to a larger scale? And also, what do you think the biggest challenge in that would be?
Oh, the challenge is only in our mind, because I mean, large scale is possible. 3 billion people are currently still living in earthen architecture. So we're talking about a majority and not a minority. We just don't have it in the majority of our journals and books and medias. That's the kind of the angle that we are not having. But still, there are more people living in earthen houses than in bricks and concrete, most probably. So this is it's upscaling is no problem, especially because the material is everywhere available. And it is a material you can use low tech and high tech. So that makes it applicable, both in every context, and you can even mix it. You can mix the high tech with the low tech, and I think we need to develop more tools to make it faster. Prefabrication, like Martin Rauch is doing, is one of the methods, and he always says, we are in earthen structures. We are maybe like where concrete was 30 years ago. So there is not much budget and not much lobbyism happening and not much money attached to it. So that's why we are behind in the development. But if more and more people are looking at it, there is still a vast field of possibilities to speeden up the processes, and scaling up is definitely possible.
Thank you very much for that. So I will leave the final question and perhaps the closing lines to our Dean, Mr. Polizoides.
Hi, Anna. Thank you for this magnificent lecture.
Thank you.
For the ones of us who admired your work through books, having your voice attached to it is really magical, because you're also not here. So there is a kind of otherworldly sense about this interaction we're having today. I have one brief question for you, one final question, and that is that in this school, we're very interested in the relationship between personal, individual brilliance and personal prerogatives of designers and the idea of tradition, which is a set of ideas about form, about material, about construction, about environment, that are carried on through a culture over time, particularly after death, particularly after you, me, or everyone else in this room is not around. What we leave behind, in other words, as direction for others to follow in one form or another. So I want to ask you whether you have seen in your work any evidence that you're leaving behind traces that are not as important, brilliant, and extraordinary as your personal work is, but which are followed by others as a method or a direction or a sense about how they should be operating. And I'm speaking particularly, I'm asking the question with ambition, because I have in mind Sana'a. What would it take for you to be the instigator of a city like that? Because you put yourself to the task by showing the image of Sana'a. So what does it take for the utter brilliance of your work to be translated into a tradition? And will we see it in your lifetime?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm always saying, I don't want to leave traces. I don't want to leave material traces. I don't want to leave any waste, but I want to leave knowledge. That is for me something that I would like to, especially, I mean, there is a lot of intrinsic knowledge in the communities where I'm still working, where I'm working, and that this knowledge is not lost. And I think, once you love something, once you see the value in something, you find a way to get to it. And I think my work wants to raise the love towards those materials, especially earth, the most humble material, and I want to raise the trust in people that whatever they have is all that they need to create something beautiful. And that is something that is very difficult because advertisement is constantly telling us otherwise, that you need to buy something in order to be someone. And what's my main aim is that I'm not leaving any waste behind. I'm totally happy if my buildings are decompostable. I cannot say, what are the needs of the coming generations. And I don't want to leave waste because this is what usually is happening. And we try to build for eternity. And in fact, our buildings stand for 40 years, 50 years, 60, 70, and they are waste. And I think, if buildings are meaningful, they will stay alive, they will be maintained. And other than that, I'm happy if they crumble to dust, crumble to the ground they come from, but that the people, the generations, that the know-how is passed on so that future generations see the value in the local materials and have the knowledge to build something beautiful out of it. That's what my hope is.
Well, we thank you very, very much for an inspiring lecture, and we hope to see you around here at some point soon in person. Thank you,
Thank
Anna,
you so much.
very much.
Thank you.